All right, let's jump right into a really fascinating piece of legal history. We're going to unpack a classic court case from 1956 that, believe it or not, still has a huge impact on everything from a teen's first job to their first influencer deal. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It's like you can't just hit a magic undo button on your life choices the second you become a legal adult. This whole case is about that tricky line between youthful decisions and adult responsibilities. So, let's paint a picture. Our story starts with this ambitious teenager, a young guy named Van Dyke, who lands what seems like a dream job with a major employer, the South African Railways. So here's the rundown. We've got Van Dyke, who was still a minor at the time. He signs a formal contract to become a member of the railway police, a serious uniformed position. And this is the key part. His father gives written consent, giving the whole thing his official stamp of approval. But here is the catch, and it is a huge one. This contract wasn't for some summer gig. It locked him in for a minimum of 3 years. I mean, when you're a teenager, 3 years feels like an absolute eternity, right? This was a serious, long-term commitment. And, well, you can probably guess what happens next. The confetti from his 18th birthday has barely been swept up, and the reality of that long commitment starts to feel pretty heavy. Van Dyke begins looking for a way out, and he figures his new adult status is his golden ticket. And this brings us to the core legal question that he put right in front of the court. He was basically asking, does turning 18 give me a get-out-of-jail-free card for a contract I signed as a minor, even if my dad said it was okay? So the whole fight really boiled down to this. Van Dyke's legal team argued that since his father hadn't read and understood every single tiny clause, all the fine print, his consent wasn't fully informed, which should make the whole contract invalid. But the railways fired back, saying, hold on, the father understood the big picture. He knew the nature of the job and the commitment, and that's more than enough to make this contract stick. So with these two arguments clashing, how did the court actually rule on this? What does it really mean for a guardian to assist a minor with a contract? The court's answer to Van Dyke's attempt to bail on his 3-year deal was simple, direct, and crystal clear: no. He could not get out of the contract. And here's why. The court laid down a super important legal principle. It defined guardian's assistance not as the guardian needing to be a lawyer who inspects every sentence, but as them needing to understand the nature and essence of the deal. It's about having meaningful knowledge, not perfect knowledge. And this quote from the judgment just sums it all up perfectly. The judge is basically saying, look, did the father know his son was signing up for a serious, multi-year job with the railway police? The answer was obviously yes. And for the court, that's what really mattered. The court's decision wasn't just about this one case. It was a really skillful balancing act between two very important and sometimes competing goals of the law. On one hand, the law absolutely wants to protect young people from getting exploited or making bad decisions because of their inexperience. But on the other hand, society needs contracts to be reliable. Businesses need to know that if they hire a teenager with their parents okay, that agreement won't just be built on sand. The court's reasoning here was just super practical. First, they said it's an impossible standard to expect every guardian to be a legal expert on every contract. Second, they figured if that was the standard, companies would just stop hiring young people altogether to avoid the risk. And third, it would create total chaos if contracts could just evaporate, which would ultimately hurt opportunities for minors themselves. So you might be thinking, okay, cool story about a railway in 1956, but what does that have to do with me today? Well, the logic from this ruling is actually more relevant than ever. It's the blueprint for how we handle contracts with young people in our modern world. Think about it. A teen influencer signing a 2-year deal with a creator network. A young athlete getting their first big sponsorship. A student accepting a loan that has a work-back clause. In all these very modern situations, that same Van Dyke principle applies. Did the parent or guardian understand the kind of commitment that was being made? And look, if you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. The law isn't looking for a perfect clause-by-clause understanding from a guardian. It's looking for a real, informed consent to the essence of the agreement. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This case isn't just about law. It's really about how we approach commitment in general. When you agree to something, a job, a loan, even a personal promise, what are you truly consenting to? The big picture or every single detail? It's something worth thinking about.